1998 changed baseball forever, because in 98 we saw the most electrifying home run race of all time revive America's love for the game. We watched a third-year shortstop in New York continue his journey toward immortality with 114 wins and the birth of a dynasty in the Bronx, while baseball's best young shortstop went 40-40, and a rookie fireballer threw the most dominant outing of all time. We watched the greatest clean player of his generation go yard 56 times trying to keep pace with history, and in San Diego, Tony Gwynn hit .321 at age 38, proving that legends just age differently. This was the year where baseball turned into appointment viewing, and for better or for worse, was never the same again. This is the full story of the 98 MLB season, the year that saved baseball. But before we dive into 98, we need to understand what baseball was like at the time. The 1994 strike had gutted fan interest, and America's pastime was in danger. The Yankees were fresh off a 96-win season and a disappointing ALDS playoff exit to Cleveland, but their core was fully formed and entering their primes under manager Joe Torre. The Diamondbacks and Devil Rays were embarking on their first seasons as operating franchises, and across baseball, power hitters became the faces of the sport. Mark McGwire launched 58 home runs in 1997, AL MVP Ken Griffey Jr. hit 56, and NL MVP Larry Walker smacked 49 for Colorado. The league knew they needed stars and star power. The long ball was the easiest way to achieve that. Seattle was coming off a 90-win season and laid claim to one of the best big threes in baseball, with Griffey, A-Rod, and the big unit Randy Johnson. The Braves had won 6 straight division titles with the league's best rotation of Maddox, Glavine, and Smoltz, yet only one ring to show for it. But pitching was evolving. Curt Schilling became a strikeout machine with 319 in 97, and a young Pedro Martínez just posted his own 305 strikeout Cy Young season in Montreal, about to become the most dominant pitcher of the late 90s and early 2000s now in Boston, even if reigning AL Cy Young Roger Clemens still held the title of best pitcher in the game. Most importantly though, the 97 Marlins shocked the world by winning the World Series in their 5th season, but the celebration didn't last long. Owner Wayne Huizenga immediately slashed payroll and traded away nearly every key contributor. By opening day of 98, almost no one from the championship roster remained, and a title defense was simply out of the question. The Cleveland Indians fell to them in the Fall Classic, haunted by Game 7, leading in the 9th inning before the Marlins stole the title with an Edgar Renteria walk-off in the 11th. But unlike the champs, Cleveland kept one of the best cores of the 90s intact, featuring Manny Ramirez and Jim Thome. After winning AL pennants in 95 and 97, their window was still wide open. The Yankees began the season with the sole goal of erasing the disappointment of 97. They quickly looked like the team that was expected. New acquisition Chuck Knobloch ignited the lineup, Derek Jeter was hitting .329, David Wells threw a perfect game in May, and New York was 37-13 through 2 months. The Texas Rangers were also hot out of the gate, led by Pudge Rodriguez and 96 MVP Juan Gonzalez, who already had 71 RBIs through 8 weeks. But the heartbeat of the season was in the Midwest, where Mark McGwire wasted no time finding the seats on a near daily basis. He crushed 7 home runs in his first 7 games, and finished April with 13 bombs, instantly prompting talk of 61. By late May, he'd gone yard 27 times with an .839 slug, one of the fastest power starts in baseball history, and at this point, he had no competition. Other contenders were taking shape though. The Padres started hot thanks to Kevin Brown, Greg Vaughn, Tony Gwynn hitting .360, and Trevor Hoffman's 15 saves. But the NL's best team was the Braves, at 39-18. Along with the production they were accustomed to from their stars, free agent signing Andres Galarraga was paying big dividends. The 37-year-old first baseman was hitting .312 with 19 home runs and an OPS over 1,000. However, the Dodgers were falling short of their playoff expectations. And in a move that stunned the sport, on May 15th, they traded franchise cornerstone Mike Piazza, the face of the team and best hitting catcher in baseball, along with Todd Zell to the Marlins. The return was a grab bag of names, most importantly Gary Sheffield, but also Charles Johnson, Bobby Bonilla, and depth pieces. The plot thickened a week later, when Piazza was flipped again, this time to the New York Mets for prospects, as Florida never intended to keep and pay Piazza the massive contract he was due for. In Chicago, the story of their early season was actually a 20-year-old right-hander on the mound, On May 6th, Kerry Wood and his triple-digits heater struck out a record-tying 20 Astros, allowing just one weak hit. Everyone believed he might just be the next big thing, talented enough to challenge Schilling, Clemens, and Pedro Martínez, who started his Red Sox career 6-1 with a 2.63 ERA and 105 strikeouts, keeping his team in the wild card race. Mark McGwire had been the most exciting hitter of the first 2 months, hands down. But in one of the most unbelievable single-month displays in MLB history, Sammy Sosa hit 20 home runs in June alone, a record that still stands to this day. And all of a sudden, McGwire wasn't running away with the home run lead. But McGwire wasn't fading by any means. He finished the first half with 37 home runs to Sosa's 33, and the Cubbies were hanging in the wild card race. Wrigley Field hadn't seen this kind of magic since the days of Sandberg and Andre Dawson. Now, the city had hopes of witnessing something even greater. New York sat at 61-20, the best first-half marks in league history. David Wells and David Cohn led the rotation, and their lineup went 9 deep. Incredibly, not a single Yankee was leading the AL in homers, RBIs, or batting average. Yet, they had the best offense in baseball. Roger Clemens recorded his 3,000th career strikeout on the final day of the first half, but the Jays were in a distant third place. The Indians, however, were exactly where they wanted to be, atop the AL Central with Manny Ramirez doing Manny Ramirez things, and Jim Thome pushing an 1100 OPS, while Bartolo Colon was June's AL Pitcher of the Month. Trevor Hoffman entered the break with 25 saves and a 1.91 ERA. Greg Vaughn had 30 home runs, and with Kevin Brown pitching like an absolute ace, San Diego was about ready for the postseason. But the biggest team development came out of Houston. The Astros were barely a 500 ball club in '97, but rose to 53-34 at the '98 break. Of course, Jeff Bagwell and Craig Biggio were the faces of the franchise, each putting together stellar offensive seasons, but the improvement was also thanks in no small part to Moises Alou, acquired from the Marlins following the World Series. The pure-hitting left fielder was sporting a .312 average with 20 home runs. Plus, Houston was set to be a big buyer at the deadline. And while the Rangers had sprinted out of the gate, by the break, Anaheim had overtaken them for the division lead by way of excellent offensive seasons from Jim Edmonds, Darren Erstad, and Tim Salmon. A 35-year-old Chuck Finley headlined their rotation with a 3.16 ERA, but the Rangers still had the bigger names, and Juan Gonzalez was up over 100 RBIs, of course earning a trip to Denver, where the All-Star festivities were one long advertisement for offense. Ken Griffey Jr. won the home run derby despite the fact that he didn't even decide to enter the competition until fans booed him during batting practice. The next night, the American League dominated the All-Star game, cruising to a 13-8 win. Roberto Alomar earned MVP honors after going 3 for 4, and Barry Bonds went deep for the NL. Once the All-Star break ended, the season became a race toward history in more ways than one. The Yankees stormed through July and August with such ease, making it clear that anyone hoping to win the American League would have to go through them. But the real show was in the National League, where the home run race between McGwire and Sosa had grown into a national fixture. McGwire stayed consistent, slugging 8 home runs in July, then another 10 in August, including a walk-off bomb off Billy Wagner in St. Louis on July 11th. Sosa, meanwhile, made the chase unpredictable, exploding for hot stretches at the end of each month, then cooling down before heating up again, leading to a dead-even tie at the end of August with 55 home runs each. St. Louis, at 65-72, wasn't especially relevant as a whole. Even so, McGwire stayed locked into the spotlight, drawing full crowds both in person and on TV, as every swing brought the possibility of something majestic. But with Sosa hitting home runs just as frequently, the Cubs were still in wildcard contention. The challenge was in the fact that Kerry Wood was shut down for the final month of the regular season with elbow soreness less than a week after throwing 133 pitches. The 9th time this season, the 20-year-old threw at least 120. Meanwhile, the NL Central leading Astros went up even another level after they traded prospects for Randy Johnson at the deadline. The big unit would be everything they dreamed of and more, which was especially frustrating for Seattle, who had only gotten 9 wins, 10 losses, and a 4.33 ERA out of Johnson come the deadline. He was set to be a free agent, and it made sense to sell him, because their postseason outlook was uninspiring despite another MVP-caliber campaign from Ken Griffey Jr. and A-Rod tracking toward a 40-40 season. However, San Francisco's situation was more complicated. Barry Bonds continued to be perhaps the most complete talent in the game, really heating up after the break, nudging his OPS over 1,000 and showing off both power with 30 home runs and speed with 22 steals. Yet because of a horrible starting rotation, the Giants could not keep pace with the Padres, who'd seized complete control of the NL West with a 15-game lead. And two major milestones were reached before the calendar flipped to September. Bonds swatted his 400th career home run on August 23rd, and Rickey Henderson became the 6th player ever to score 2,000 career runs on August 31st. A bright moment for the third-place A's. McGwire and Sosa each entered the month with 55 home runs, and McGwire didn't waste time, clobbering a pair in each of his first 2 games this month, tying Maris's 61 on the 7th. Then, on the 8th against the Cubs, McGwire launched a line drive missile to left field for number 62. Sosa ran in from right to embrace him at home plate, and in that moment, the home run race became a celebration. But the race wasn't over. Sosa tied and passed Maris with a pair of big flies on the 13th, and they were tied at 66 after the 25th. But McGwire would club 2 more in each of his final 2 games, finishing with 70. However, Sosa would get the last laugh, leading baseball in RBIs and runs, and taking home NL MVP as Chicago grabbed a wild card while St. Louis was left out of the October fun. The Cubs and Giants were all tied at 89 and 73 after Game 162, but in the wild card tiebreaker, the Cubs beat the Giants 5-3 at Wrigley. McGwire won the record, Sosa won the fans' hearts. But neither one of them were baseball's best hitter in the second half. Sosa wasn't even the best in his own city. That imaginary title belonged to White Sox Albert Bell. After the break, Bell led baseball in OPS, slugging, and RBIs, pairing 31 second-half home runs with a .387 average in that same time. He finished 1998 with 49 home runs, 152 RBIs, and an OPS well over 1,000. Numbers that could have made him the face of almost any other season. And if not for the White Sox sub-500 record, he would have had a shot at the AL MVP, which went to Juan Gonzalez for the second time in 3 years. Not undeservingly, as he finished with 45 home runs and an AL-leading 157 RBIs, helping snatch the AL West back out of Anaheim's grasp. Nomar Garciaparra, Derek Jeter, and A-Rod were 2nd, 3rd, and 9th in voting, which compels me to note the golden age of shortstops the game was in during this era. Amazingly, A-Rod's 40-40 and another 56 home runs from Griffey couldn't get Seattle to even sniff the postseason. The most complete season, though, you could argue didn't even come from a hitter. At age 35, Roger Clemens produced one of the greatest pitching campaigns of the modern era. In his second season with the Blue Jays, Clemens went 20-6 with a .265 ERA and an AL best 271 strikeouts, capturing Cy Young number 5 and his second straight pitching triple crown. Toronto had no shot in the AL East, though, because the Yankees made history with an American League record 114 wins. Bernie Williams hit .339, Jeter .324, Martinez drove in 123, and David Wells and David Cone were each top 4 in Cy Young voting. Cleveland held on to win their 4th straight AL Central title, as Manny Ramirez knocked in 145, Bartolo Colon made his first All-Star team, and Kenny Lofton returned to give them a jolt of speed when they needed it most. Likewise, the Braves easily claimed their 7th straight NL East title, via 106 wins and a Cy Young season from Tom Glavine. But the Padres built one of the most dangerous rosters in the sport. Tony Gwynn would finish hitting .321 at age 38, Greg Vaughn hit 50 home runs, while Trevor Hoffman and Kevin Brown finished 2nd and 3rd in Cy Young voting. They finished with 98 wins, the 3rd best record in the National League behind Atlanta and Houston, who ended 102-60. Not only because of the ever-predictable Bagwell and Biggio, but also a 3rd place MVP finish for Moises Alou, and Randy Johnson placing 7th in Cy Young voting after being in the NL for 2 months. He went 10-1 with a 1.28 ERA after joining the Astros. And one of the greatest hitters of his generation, Paul Molitor, took his final swing for the Twins. In Game 1, David Wells threw 8 shutout innings and the Yankees won 2-0. Game 2, Andy Pettitte held the 2nd best offense in baseball to 1 run through 7 innings. The Rangers scored exactly 1 run the entire series, and the Yankees swept them easily. their second ALDS victory over Texas in 3 years, and scary as anything was the fact that their offense hadn't even woken up. Boston opened their series by making a statement. Facing Cleveland's Jarrett Wright in Game 1, Mo Vaughn set the tone with a 3-run homer in the first, then added another later as Boston piled on for Pedro. The 11-3 blowout snapped Boston's 13-game postseason losing streak. But controversial calls in the beginning of Game 2 led to ejections of both Indians manager Mike Hargrove and starter Dwight Gooden, igniting Cleveland amidst the chaos. The Indians answered with a massive offensive push, highlighted by a 3-run home run from David Justice, flipping the game and evening the series with a 9-5 win. In Game 3, Tomey and Lofton went deep, while Manny homered twice to push the Indians to a 4-3 win. A late Boston rally fell short, and Cleveland took a 2-1 lead heading into Game 4, where Boston scored first but couldn't hold the lead. In the 8th, Justice delivered again, ripping a 2-run double that put Cleveland ahead for good and advanced them to face New York. In the NL, the Cubs were fresh off their dramatic tiebreaker win and a regular season that included multiple sweeps of Atlanta. But in Game 1, John Smoltz was in full control. Michael Tucker gave the Braves an early lead with a 2-run homer before Ryan Klesko hit a 7th-inning grand slam that served as the knockout blow. Game 2 was razor thin as Tom Glavine and Kevin Tapani traded zeros. Chicago finally broke through in the 6th, but leaving Tapani in proved costly. Javi Lopez tied it with a 9th-inning homer, and in the 10th, Chipper Jones ripped a walk-off single. So facing elimination, Chicago turned to Kerry Wood in Game 3, but ran into Greg Maddux at his surgical best, who allowed just 2 late runs, while Atlanta broke the game open in the 8th with Eddie Perez's grand slam and swept Chicago after completely neutralizing Sosa. Houston had the National League's best offense and arrested Randy Johnson. But in Game 1, Kevin Brown threw one of the most dominant playoff outings ever, striking out 16 Astros across 8 innings. The Padres scratched across 2 runs, including a Greg Vaughn homer, and survived an anxious 9th as Trevor Hoffman closed out the 2-1 win. In Game 2, though, Shane Reynolds righted Houston with 7 strong, and their bats chased Andy Ashby early. Even after Billy Wagner blew a late lead on a pinch-hit game-tying homer by Jim Leyritz, Houston walked it off in the bottom of the 9th, earning its first postseason win since 1986 to even the series. So with momentum at stake in Game 3, Bruce Bochy gambled by starting Kevin Brown on short rest. Houston could not capitalize on his shaky control, but there Mike Hampton matched him pitch for pitch. In the 7th, Leyritz did it again with a go-ahead home run, and Hoffman struck out the side to seal another 2-1 victory. Then in Game 4, Sterling Hitchcock bested Randy Johnson, striking out 11 in 6 dominant innings as Leyritz homered for the 3rd straight game. And a big 8th inning ended the best season in Astros franchise history to this point. The Indians were the defending American League champions and eliminated New York in the '97 ALDS. But Game 1 unraveled fast for them as the Yankees jumped out to a commanding lead. Jorge Posada had an RBI single and a solo shot, while David Wells lasted into the 9th. A late Manny Ramirez homer provided Cleveland's only offense in a 7-2 Yankees win. In Game 2, David Justice's 4th-inning homer handed the Yankees their first postseason deficit, and despite tying the game late, New York repeatedly failed to cash in. The game stretched into the 12th, where hell broke loose on a botched bunt play that allowed Cleveland to retake the lead. Kenny Lofton's clutch 2-run single sealed a wild extra-inning win. And at Jacobs Field for Game 3, Bartolo overwhelmed the Yankees with his girth and tonnage, while Jim Thome and Manny Ramirez led a home run barrage that chased Andy Pettitte early. Colon finished off the complete game as the Indians surged ahead 2-1. Facing pressure in Game 5, El Duque delivered 7 shutout innings in his postseason debut, backed by timely power from Paul O'Neill and airtight bullpen work. The 4-0 win tied the series, resetting the ALCS as a best-of-3. And the Yankees started Game 5 with a bases-loaded rally, but Lofton and Manny each answered with round trippers in the first. However, 2 more runs would be enough for the Yankees to take a 5-3 win, moving within 1 victory of the World Series. New York dominated the first 3 innings of Game 6, only to see Jim Thome's grand slam erase a 6-run lead. But with Jeter's 2-run triple restoring control, Mariano closed it to clinch their 2nd World Series berth in 3 years. And after a 2-hour rain delay in Atlanta, Andrew Jones put the Braves on the board. But Tony Gwynn and late Atlanta mistakes forced extra innings. where Ken Caminiti crushed a homer to steal Game 1. Kevin Brown followed that with a 3-hit shutout of Atlanta, furthering his reputation as a Braves nemesis and sending San Diego home up 2-0. In Game 3, Atlanta repeatedly loaded the bases but came away empty each time. A few RBI hits for San Diego was enough, and Trevor Hoffman struck out 2 in the 9th to finish it, giving the Padres a likely insurmountable 3-0 lead. But in Game 4, the Braves won on the back of a 6-run eruption in the 7th inning, capped by Andres Galarraga's grand slam. Ken Caminiti and John Vanderwall swung momentum back to San Diego in Game 5, but Michael Tucker stunned Kevin Brown with a go-ahead 3-run homer. Greg Maddux then notched the only save of his career and forced a Game 6 to give Atlanta real hope, which ended abruptly once San Diego broke the game open against Glavine in the 6th. The Braves' offense was shut out, Hitchcock, winner of 2 games, was named NLCS MVP, and San Diego completed one of the most romantic pennant runs of the decade to clinch their first one since 1984. Kevin Brown and David Wells faced off in Game 1 as San Diego stars flexed their muscles. Tony Gwynn crushed the first postseason homer of his career, and Greg Vaughn went deep twice, turning an early 2-0 deficit into a Padres lead. But a 7th-inning New York rally tied the game, and after a pivotal would-have-been strike 3 that got called a ball, Tino Martinez launched a grand slam on the very next pitch that flipped the series instantly, and Mariano closed it out 9-6. In Game 2, San Diego folded under pressure with defensive mistakes as New York piled on runs. El Duque kept the Padres quiet, and the Yankees rolled to another 9-3 victory, heading west with full control. San Diego kept it closer in Game 3, though. Sterling Hitchcock and Tony Gwynn sparked the Padres to a mid-game surge, and for a moment, Qualcomm Stadium came alive until Scott Brosius happened. First, a solo shot, then a devastating 3-run homer off of Trevor Hoffman. Rivera bent but did not break in the 9th, sealing a 3-0 series lead and putting the clincher in the hands of Andy Pettitte, who pitched his finest game this October, beating Kevin Brown, who gave up 3 runs through 8 innings, and Rivera slammed the door shut one final time for the sweep. This was title number 24 for New York, which tied the Montreal Canadiens for the most championships by any franchise in North American professional sports, a mark the Yankees would soon surpass. The 1998 team became baseball's gold standard, 125 wins including the postseason, the most in MLB history, the rare club that combined the best regular season record with a championship run. But this was the Padres' second World Series defeat in as many tries. To this day, they remain one of only 2 teams with multiple league pennants but no championship. Kevin Brown departed for the Dodgers in free agency soon after, signing the first $100 million contract in baseball history. Ken Caminiti and Steve Finley also left for Houston and Arizona, while Greg Vaughn was dealt to Cincinnati, closing the door on a brief but magical run. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, I think you'll like this one too.